May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. A friend of mine opens her services Sundays with the phrase, "Good morning, saints." And it is a great morning. It's good to be with you on this very special occasion, celebrating 35 years of ministry in this area. I was very happy when Catherine suggested using the readings for All Saints Sunday for today's occasion. Certainly, the readings speak of this day, and they speak of the dedication and the perseverance of many of you who are gathered here today, online, as well as many who have come and gone from this community. This is an important event, and we need to pause and give great thanks for the ministry of this congregation, St. Philip's, here in Scotts Valley. But before we spend too much time relegating people to positions of sainthood here, much of which is well-deserved, I'm sure, we might want to see if indeed you want to be included in the role of saints. Now, I should tell you a little bit about my background. I went to high school in a very small town in northern New Mexico. To give you a sense of what the town was like, it's the lowrider capital of the world. Ooh, not kidding. And a prominent feature of this town was this one particular corner where there was a bar, and the bar was called Saints and Sinners. Now, I have never been inside that bar, and it's still there, I am told. I don't think I'll ever go inside that bar. Its name, though, Saints and Sinners, has shaped my understanding of this certain body of people in our church's history. For St. Augustine was very clear that the church is not intended to be a museum for saints, but a hospital for sinners. In that quote, this early theologian was really talking about his own struggles, because it took Augustine a while to come to terms with his own sinful nature. And he wrote a lot about that, which those of us who went to seminary were forced, yes, compelled, forced to read. His point, though, was that the church would be off base if it did not encourage us, each of us, to come and deal with our sinful natures. And he did not let up on that topic in his book, Confessions. Now, Augustine came from a time when the stories of the lives of saints, or their hagiographies, were widely being circulated and told as a way to build up the early Christian church. The stories of the lives of saints were miraculous, remarkable, unattainable. Everyone heard these stories, some of them true, some not so true, and aspired to be like their favorite saint. There were visions and signs, messages, miracles that were ascribed to the saints. And these were signs of God's holy presence at work in a very mundane world, in a world where disease and famine and war and violence were rampant, and daily living was difficult. And in that world, the inspiring lives of saints kept people going. And now we turn to the lives of saints again for inspiration and insight. You probably each have your own favorite saint. Yes? Yes, you do. I know you do. I have several that I go to as well. But in particular, I really enjoy St. Teresa of Avila. I've always liked her. Teresa is spunky and daring. She is reflective and she is prayerful. And I had a chance to spend a week in Avila, Spain in August, and I delved more deeply into her existence there. Born, a little bit of background, born in 1515, Teresa was the daughter of a wealthy textile merchant in this small rural town. As was customary with daughters of her social standing, Teresa was sent to a convent to get the education she needed for a good marriage. And while at the convent, Teresa decided that the education was terrible. And she also decided that she did not want to be married. Her father pleaded with her in vain. He even went to the fathers on the town council to have them either persuade Teresa to marry or declare her mentally ill. They did neither. Eventually, Teresa's father, who in fact did love her dearly, gave in, and he sent her back to the convent. And from then on, Teresa was on a path that alternated between intense prayer and vigorous action. While at the convent, she developed a strong prayer life, spending hours in quiet contemplation and conversation with Jesus. And during those years, she began to reform the convent, turning it back to its original purposes, with prayer at the center of community life, and education as important to each woman, and hours dedicated to work and study and so on. The convent was cloistered, and the community maintained a vow of poverty. She spent 30 years in that particular convent. It is called the Monasterio de la Encarnación. I could tell you more about that convent because I spent a little bit of time there. Teresa then went out to reform other convents and monasteries all over Spain. Now, the story goes that in her 60s, Teresa was out on horseback on the way to see one of her monasteries that she had reformed. So I want you to put this in context. Medieval times, single woman on horseback. You can see her courage and her drive. This time, on this journey, a thunderstorm came up suddenly, and as Teresa was fording a river, there was a flash of lightning and a roar of thunder, and Teresa's horse reared up and tossed Teresa into the water. Soaking wet, Teresa rose up, clenched her fist, yelled at God, and said, "No wonder you don't have many friends." You can see why I like her. I'm pretty sure that Teresa would have never characterized herself as a saint. In fact, in her book of life, which is her autobiography, she repeatedly describes her sinful nature. No, saints do not consider themselves saints. Like Teresa, they know themselves for their sinfulness, their failures, and their mistakes. They are humble people who know themselves as sinners. In many ways, when we think about it, our official saints were ordinary people who simply did extraordinary things. And that's probably why we are celebrating on this occasion with the readings for All Saints. Because this is really about you and about those who came before you, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. What drove you to establish a congregation here? There's another Episcopal one right down the road. What drove the imaginative idea to buy a motel and turn it into a church? The short answer was and continues to be a desire to faithfully serve God's people in this place, which is what you're doing. With Pip's pantry and your concern for children, the community shelter, the ongoing Bible study and formation programs, you serve God's people. And you keep adapting your plans as you go along, which is a very good thing. In your background as a parish and as individuals, you have people who have modeled this for you. A parent or grandparent, a family member or a friend, a clergy person, a town leader, a person who helped to form you and shape you to be a faithful follower of Jesus. Where you are today is because of the saints and sinners of the past who whispered in your ear and brought you here. You have stories of these blessed saints, so many stories. Blessed are they, and blessed are you. For you are the ordinary saints and sinners of our time, called to serve, to be, to bring about God's kingdom. 35 years from now, what stories will be told about you?